I'm not in the love seat. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm Amy. Today I'm going to be chatting with you all about my reading habits and isms and things that I do while I read. I wasn't exactly sure how to go about this because I've been thinking about doing this video for a while now until I saw April Olin, I'll link her channel down below for you all, do a reading habits tag video. This tag was originally created by the Book Jazz. I'll link her channel down below as well. But if you're interested in learning a little bit more about my reading habits and how exactly I go about reading, then go ahead and keep watching. Question number 1 is, do I have a certain place at home where I read? I never used to. I do now though, now that I have my book room, which is where I'm filming. This is largely an area that I've kind of cultivated and created and absolutely adore now. I love spending time in here, so I tend to sit on the love seat while I read in a particular spot right next to the end table where there's a lamp and I can put all of my things. And I also read in bed quite a bit. My nighttime routine is I get a cup of tea and I read if I haven't already started reading up until that point. And then when I am absolutely ready for bed, then I go and get ready for bed, as in washing my face and all that stuff, and then I read in bed for a while usually. So those are the two places at home where I generally read, although in the summertime and when the weather's nicer, I'm known to read it outside as well. Question 2 is bookmark or a random piece of paper. Both. It just kind of depends. Sometimes I'm scrounging to find a piece of paper wherever I'm at because I'm too lazy to stand up and get a bookmark, and other times I have a bookmark before I even start the book. So no cut and dry answer for that one. 3, can you just stop reading, or do you have to read to the end of a chapter or a certain number of pages? It depends. Largely, I do like to try and stop at the end of a chapter, and if not at the end of the chapter, in the little sub-chapters. I don't know if there's a proper term for that or not. But if I'm absolutely exhausted, I'll just stop mid-page. 4, do you eat or drink while reading? I generally always have something to drink. In the fall and winter months, it is a cup of tea, always. But in the summer months, it could be anything: water, sparkling water, maybe a pop every now and then. But generally, always something to drink. Rarely do I eat while I read. I just don't have the skill to manage to do both of those things at the same time for whatever reason. I don't know. But drinking, yes. 5, multitasking, music or TV while you read. I prefer probably none. Music doesn't bother me. I zone while I read. It actually makes Aaron really frustrated sometimes because he'll have an entire conversation with himself while trying to talk to me, but I don't hear any of it because I'm reading. I don't love the TV on. I find the TV to be more distracting, but music isn't the end of the world. But if I just sit down and read, I don't turn anything on in order to do that, because the room in which I read in most of the time doesn't have a TV in it, and neither does our bedroom. So no background multitasking. 6, one book at a time or several. You all know I read one book at a time. Said it plenty of times, and I'll say it again. I only read one book at a time. 7, reading at home or everywhere. Generally, I read the most at home, but I don't have a commute that allows me to read, which is a blessing. I totally acknowledge that, but I literally takes me maybe 3 minutes to get to work. So, and I'm driving myself, so that doesn't work very well. But I will read just about anywhere if I have the opportunity to. I always take a book with me, so if I'm at an appointment or I'm waiting or I have a few free minutes, I'll pick out a book and start reading. 8, reading out loud or silently in your head. I almost exclusively read silently in my head unless I've come across a particularly tricky passage or something that I have read several times over and I'm not quite grasping or following the train of thought. I will read it out loud because that tends to help me pause in the correct places, whereas in my brain I sometimes go a little bit too fast, I think. Let's see here. 9, do you read ahead or skip pages? No, because that defeats the purpose of reading a book. Right? Am I right? I think I'm right. 10, breaking the spine or keeping it like new. I don't generally break a spine on purpose, but it doesn't bother me to break it. I am hard on my books, and in that sense, I am not afraid to throw them in my purse or write in them, which is partially the next question, but they're meant to be read and loved, and I do love used books. I love books that come pre-loved, like they have their own story before they get to you that's not the story within their pages. I've said that before on my channel, but yeah, it doesn't bother me if there's a broken spine. Like I said, I don't like crack the spine necessarily, but generally while I read, it does start to crease and whatnot, and that doesn't bother me because I love a well-loved book. That's kind of repetitive, but it's the truth. The last question, 11, do you write in your books? Yes, I do. I did not always do that. Or in college and whatnot, I only wrote in my textbooks that I was reading, but now I do it in almost all the books that I read. And I don't necessarily do it every single time, but some books I tend to have more thoughts about. And a great example of that is probably one of my favorite books of this year is The Tsar of Love and Techno by Anthony Marra. I also tab pages. That's a fairly new habit for me since starting booktube, but I do really like it because I find I can go back and find what I found really interesting, and a lot of these books I do hope to eventually reread and would love to see what parts I found interesting the last time that I read. So I do underline and whatnot, underline and whatnot, and sometimes I write notes as well. See, here's a bookmark that was a receipt from a place where I did not buy this book. But yeah, I write in my books. And then another thing that I do, and I've done this now since starting my booktube channel, because when I do my book reviews, I like to kind of keep track of my thoughts so I don't lose them, that I will go back into the end pages and I will write notes. So those are all the notes that I had. I mean, just poignant sentences and thoughts. Each story could stand on its own, but the nuances that connect the stories make it into an even more perfect story. Sometimes it's just one word: wolves, pollution, tears. So that's how I read my books. And like I said, not every book do I do that in, because sometimes I don't have enough thoughts or find enough of the passages very interesting, but I do enjoy doing that. Although sometimes I find myself frustrated when I really like to mark a lot, like when I was reading that book, because I don't want to have to pause, but I want to be able to mark my passage. It's a double-edged sword, I guess you could say. Let me know if any of you have that problem as well. But those tend to be my reading habits: how I read, where I read, that I write in my books, that I beat up on my books, and I don't buy double copies so that one stays pristine. I don't do that. I like a book that is loved, because books deserve to be loved. And part of the reason that I feel that way is because of an essay that I read from, I think it's right here behind me, Anne Fadiman, and this is Ex Libris. If you have not read this little collection, it's called Confessions of a Common Reader. It is so good, and I used to be much more paranoid about how I treated my books, but then I read this book and a lot of my opinions changed. And that being said, I don't think it's bad that other people keep their books pristine, but for me, it's just more of a story. It looks weathered and loved. But there you have it, you all. What are your reading habits? I would love to know what your weird little isms are. Like, another weird little ism for me is that while I'm reading a book, during the first half of the book, the bookmark always goes in the second half of the book, and then vice versa once I get to the latter half of the book. And what are yours? What do you use for a bookmark? How do you read? What do you read? Where do you read? Please tell me. But if you liked this video, please like it. And if you loved it, please subscribe. And we will see you in my next video. Happy reading.